Welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming. My name is Carmine DeFilio. I'm the director of IICEC. And without much further ado, I want to get right into our discussion. I want to say that ever since I came to Turkey over 2 years ago, I've been hearing a lot about having a Turkish natural gas hub, about the importance of natural gas to Turkey, about Turkey being a transit country, and of all the different opportunities that having a gas hub in Turkey might present. I've always thought it myself that it's a win-win-win situation for everybody. It's certainly a win for Turkey to have commodity prices for natural gas instead of being tied to the price of oil. It's a win for Europe, I think, to have especially southeastern Europe, to have a pricing point in Turkey. And it's actually, ironically, I think, a win for for the countries that import gas into Turkey. They may not realize it, but a gas hub in Turkey would actually be good for them as well. In any case, I've been going to conferences right from the start to hear about the prospects for a Turkey gas hub, thinking that it would be a great idea. But of course, with Turkey being in a transition from a state-controlled energy economy to a privatized energy economy, it was clear that a number of things had to be done to bring about a Turkish gas hub. And very often, the conferences I went to, I'd hear discussions about it, and discussions would be at a certain level. But there was one fellow I met, and he had some really pertinent things about a natural gas hub. And we had a discussion afterwards, and I got to know Kerem Topuz. And then after a little while, I asked if he would write a paper on the subject for IICEC, an IICEC Energy and Climate Research paper. You see it at the back. It has a new look now for our energy and climate research papers. We're very happy with that new look. And so he provided the paper recently. I'm very pleased that we have an opportunity to publish it and talk about this very important topic for Turkey, and welcome Kerem Topuz as our guest speaker, and also our distinguished panelist, Mr. Özkök, who's the CEO of Engie Turkey and IICEC board member, I'm very proud to say, and an expert in his own right in the oil and gas market, and my good friend, retired Ambassador Mithat Rende, and as our discussants tonight. And I think we're looking forward to a very interesting discussion, because I think we're going to hear tonight a really substantive discussion of what it takes to have a Turkish gas hub, physical gas hub and trading center, what has to be done to bring it about, and most importantly, what are the real benefits for Turkey, for Europe, and for Turkey's natural gas suppliers. So, Kerem.
Thank you, Professor DeFilio. It was also a pleasure for me to have worked on this paper together with you. Ambassador Rende, Mr. Özkök, my colleagues at the Istanbul International Center for Energy and Climate, Director of Research, Mr. Güray, valued members of the Turkish press, and the distinguished members of the Turkish energy community for being here today with us in this presentation of this paper. Like Professor DeFilio said, it was about 9 months ago when we exchanged the initial ideas of this paper together with him. Over the course of this period, there have been both positive and negative developments in the Turkish gas markets, and we had to update some sections of the paper several times. I think you would agree with me that Turkish energy markets are far from being boring. However dynamic it is, there is one issue in the gas market that never loses attention, never expires, and never gets old. And that issue is Turkey becoming a regional gas hub. While preparing for this presentation, I did a Google search using historical settings, and I found out that the first appearance of the Turkish energy hub or Turkish gas hub was about 10 years ago, first in some academic studies on political science, and then in some policy papers by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Some of our colleagues at BOTAŞ probably have some studies dating further back, but none of them were publicized, so we don't know about them. But this, it seems that the fact that the first occurrence of this idea in public, being through the members of the political science researchers community and the Turkish foreign affairs community, underlines its importance on Turkish foreign policy. To the best of my industry knowledge, over the course of these past 10 years, at least the time period that I think this idea has emerged, the Turkish, gas hub idea, there have been numerous studies on the potential various aspects of such a hub development. These studies were first done by some direct stakeholders through their representative NGOs, and then by European Union and World Bank funded studies conducted in orchestration by the Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources. I myself have been fortunate enough to have participated in some of these studies in the past. Personally speaking, over the course of my 15-year career in the Turkish energy markets, I think gas hub aspiration of Turkey far exceeds any other topic in the sense of more talk than action. Despite all the sincere efforts towards this goal and the extensive investments in infrastructure, I have to say that we have to increase the pace of policy making if we are to create further value from this opportunity. In this paper, I will briefly summarize the main topics of the paper, but our intention was not to repeat the valuable studies already conducted by our colleagues on the various aspects of the hub development. Rather than republishing these views, we wanted to underline the direct national stakeholder advantages of the aspired Turkish gas hub for Turkey, for its suppliers, and for Europe. Like Professor said, this is expected to create a win-win-win situation for all these national stakeholders. The list of potential advantages presented herein are not meant to be exhaustive, and political challenges are not, and potential challenges are not put in primary focus. Rather than that, the aim is towards providing a positive alternative view that looks at the mutually beneficial aspects for all parties involved. Our paper starts with a wealth of background information on the global natural gas markets with specific focus on European and Turkish cases. Then we present some foundational information on the definition of a gas hub, followed by our opinions on potential benefits to Turkey, its suppliers, and Europe. And then we conclude our paper with a comparison of the current status of the Turkish gas market with some established hubs in Europe, and presents our 4 pillars of a well-functioning gas hub. 1 second. Yeah. Without taking much of your valuable time, now I'd like to highlight some parts of our study, and let's start with the definition of a gas hub. Sorry. Yeah. In the shortest definition, a natural gas hub is a platform on which natural gas can be traded by adequate number of buyers and sellers at fair prices and in a reliable environment. The hub can be a physical hub, like the Henry Hub in the United States or Zeebrugge in Belgium, or a virtual hub, like National Balancing Point in UK, or the Title Transfer Facility in Netherlands. When we speak of the potential for Turkey to establish a regional gas hub, the focus is on a physical hub rather than a virtual hub. This view is supported with Turkey's variety of import pipelines, LNG regasification terminals, underground storage investments, and the extensive distribution infrastructure and interconnections between Asia and Europe. Moving on to the potential benefits, the first viewpoint is from Turkey. Why is such a hub beneficial for Turkey? First, natural gas helps Turkey reach its energy security objectives. Turkish economy is currently dependent on imported hydrocarbons for heating, industry, power generation, and natural gas plays an important role in its energy mix. A hub will be expected to diversify supply in this sense. Second, Turkey's current account deficit is directly correlated with its energy import bill. A competitive hub would both help decrease costs and provide efficiency gains in operation and contractual flexibility. Third, the environmental performance of natural gas outpaces that of all other fossil fuels. I think some of us would remember the days in Ankara when it was forbidden to take your car outside because the air was so polluted. With the introduction of the natural gas to the system, pollution problem in large metropoles of Turkey have been resolved. This was, of course, 30, 40 years ago, but this was a significant step. And abundance and management flexibility of natural gas in a hub through a gas hub would speed up penetration and subscription for end users, and thus use of an environmentally friendly fuel by end users. Most importantly, flexibility provided by natural gas-fired power plants helps integration of renewables into the system. But of course, this is valid as long as they are compensated through flexibility, for their flexibility through appropriate market mechanisms. And finally, a gas trading hub could provide thousands of new jobs in Turkey. Expertise gained in these areas can benefit other trading-focused areas and businesses. Moving on. Sorry. Why is such a hub beneficial for Turkey's natural gas suppliers? Well, the main benefit originates from rebranding of the gas molecules. By purchasing gas from Iran, Azerbaijan, Russia, potentially East Med, and maybe even rest of Middle East, Turkey could denationalize the gas in the system and help diffuse the European Union's political opposition from regional gas supplies transiting into Europe. Thus, European fears of geopolitical leverage given to a single supplier could be eliminated. Furthermore, a Turkish hub with transparent price discovery, reflecting market fundamentals of supply and demand, would attract further supply, including LNG, from all over the world. Such a market will also generate price signals necessary to promote market activity, number of players, liquidity, and debt. Turkey's recent investments in LNG regasification through FSRU terminals and capacity increases, and global developments in the LNG markets have actually strengthened this aspect. Next, elimination of the restrictive destination clauses in the current contracts would help expand the market base and trigger bigger volumes in trade from the perspective of suppliers. A Turkish hub with a bankable reference price will actually increase the prospects of new supply project developments. What I mean is that within the presence of a reference price generated in Turkey, Eastern Mediterranean gas or other gas sources could find a market in Turkey where they can develop their upstream projects. Last but not least, a well-functioning Turkish hub will create different trading tools, boost both liquidity and depth, which would in turn provide the market participants with the necessary tools to manage ambiguity via stabilizing cash flows, reducing exposure, and hedging their positions in the market. And the final point of view from the demanding markets, why is a Turkish hub beneficial for the demanding markets? Two things confront. First, essentially, European countries could significantly benefit from a natural gas hub in Turkey, since their import levels are forecasted to increase, and a well-functioning gas hub will naturally help with gas-to-gas competition, and provide contractual negotiations on more favorable terms. Furthermore, if Southeastern Europe is to strengthen its gas infrastructure and gain diversity in terms of source country, it needs more gas from Turkey, either via Trans-Adriatic pipeline or via a bidirectional west line. Having looked at the potential benefits of the Turkish hub, now let me briefly summarize my opinion on the foundational aspects of the Turkish gas hub. Yeah. In consideration of the Agency for Cooperation of Energy Regulators and European Federation of Energy Traders evaluations of current international natural gas hubs, we have identified 4 main pillars that Turkey must establish in order to become an international gas hub. You can find details of such comparisons in the paper. I'm not going to go into that detail. But I'm just going to mention about the 4 pillars that we have identified as important in order to achieve a status of an international gas hub. The first one is, and the costliest one, item to become a natural gas hub is the physical infrastructure required. Turkey has largely solved this problem for the domestic market thanks to years of investments in all aspects of the system: transmission, distribution, underground storage, regasification, import pipelines. But increasing the export capacities and including the reverse flow options via the West Line is imperative in respect to create a bidirectional trade environment. 2, full legal unbundling of BOTAŞ is still a major prerequisite for the establishment of the gas hub. This is also a requirement by the 3rd energy package of European Union, that the vertically integrated utilities need to be unbundling their transmission and trader positions. And this is also valid for Turkey. I understand that the BOTAŞ has some concerns from governmental social perspectives, but this is a requirement for the long-term welfare development of the country itself. A prudent policy would be to balance all of government's social obligations, and it would likely be an evolutionary process rather than a sudden shift. But this needs to be done if we are to create a hub environment in Turkey. 3, a realistic, cost-based, cost-reflective, and transparent price formation structure is a prerequisite for a well-functioning gas hub. Even though mechanisms currently exist to determine prices, only BOTAŞ possesses enough gas, has contractual flexibility, and serves a portfolio large enough to be a meaningful player in this market. This would require renegotiation of current contracts, releasing more gas to market participants, and elimination of all direct or indirect price barriers in both power and gas markets. 4, the effectiveness of the regulatory environment, legal basis, and the network code must be established through predictability, accountability, and practicality in order to have a reliable gas market, which is crucial for a gas hub. As I have stated before, moving in the hub direction needs to be an evolutionary process rather than an overnight shift. Turkey's most important resource towards this goal has been its timing advantage gained through being a large destination market for gas and the billions of investments already made committed into the gas market infrastructure. Unfortunately, we are observing at this time that this advantage is sliding past, and Turkey now faces an option of becoming a transit country rather than a hub country. Becoming a transit country would mean giving up on the many benefits that I have mentioned and we are mentioning in our paper, and being content with the just transmit fees collected from these transit pipelines. I believe if the Turkish hub is going to be a reality rather than an aspiration in the years to come, a diligent integration of commercial practices, liberal policy making, and most importantly, foreign diplomacy is compulsory at this point. This concludes my summary of the paper. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I will now ask Mr. Özkaç to provide his initial comments, and then after that, Mr. Rende.
Thank you, Professor. I would like to first thank Kerem Bey for this study, which is quite summarizing the issue of around, he founds around 10 years, and I believe it's around 20 years this talk about Turkey being up is on the stage. As far as my comments, before making comment, I would like to make some contributions, maybe opening up the subject a little bit wider. So for me, there are almost three dynamics that could make Turkey a decent hub or an interesting, attractive hub. One of them is the way that the gas contracts that Turkey has for import. So Mr. Topuz mentioned some of these dynamics as flexibility, price, and also duration of the contracts is quite important, because when we talk about duration of the contracts, Turkey was obliged to make long-term contracts in the past in order to be able to finance the pipelines which we didn't have at that time. So now all those pipelines are there, and we might not need the same durations like 20 years, 16 years, 15 years. So we can maybe target shorter term contracts as up to 5 years or even less than 5 years, which could create also a kind of flexibility in many terms. In terms of general flexibility, we need to consider to have more, let's say, favorable take or pay conditions, which is also resulting from already financed pipelines and projects and high demand that Turkish market can offer to the suppliers. Also daily quantities, daily consumption quantities is an issue for flexibility. The CQs are can be quite flexible, which will improve the market conditions as well. Coming back to price, price is an issue in Turkey, so because we still do not have a kind of common indexed price with European market, which we need to have, because when we are becoming hub, we are not targeting only to trade for Turkey, but we are targeting also the multinationals to come and trade in Turkey. So in order to be able to benchmark the price in this hub with the hubs in Europe, there should be a common sense, and this common sense is not existing for the timing in terms of price indexing. So infrastructure is quite required for a decent hub. We are quite lucky in Turkey because our infrastructure is relatively young, because our market, gas market, is relatively young. Turkey is using gas since around 35 years. The regulatory framework is around 15 years old, and also the distribution, the downstream is around as well 15 years old. So we are still in the investment period for gas infrastructure. We are a little bit behind on the storage side, which we know, which all the stakeholders of this already know, and trying to overcome it. And the most important thing is the market dynamics. First, the demand should be there in order to be a decent market. And the demand can only be increased by good macro dynamics, macroeconomic dynamics. So the other thing is well liberalized, let's say, market conditions. Today we all know that we have this on the supply side, so we have a big player, which this size of this player is not very much making the market liberalized, and it should be sold maybe through bundling or through let's say well managed privatization, not only selling off but maybe a bigger body with private players inside, or public options, which could be the case. Coming back to the main topic of why and how Turkey can be a good hub, first we need to think about one question, is why Turkey, because why Turkey should be a hub and what is the benefits for Turkey has been answered. But what is the benefits for multinational players to come and trade in Turkey? We need to define this as well. I think this is missing because Turkey has some ambitions on that, and those ambitions are listed for benefits of Turkey. But I think in Turkey, with the players in the market, we are already making trade. But we want new players. We want to serve out of Turkey through this hub. And we need to define this attractiveness for those multinational players. And it is more crucial than before now because of the reason which Kerem Bey mentioned. Turkey is slightly becoming a transit country, and being transit country is not preventing you to be a hub, because if you look at, for instance, Baumgarten, we cannot say that Austria is not a transit country as well. It has a transit position geographically coming, but they structure the hub in a way that it is quite attractive to make a trade in this point. So I think we need to define these attractiveness options, advantages for the players. And the last point is there are other potential hubs spoken in the region. So we need to define our countries, Turkey's competitive advantage in front of those potential hubs in the region. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. I would like to express my thanks, first of all, to Professor Carmine Di Filio and to Bora Güray and their able team for having organized this meeting today. And many thanks to Mr. Topuz for his paper in which he expressed his views in details, and also for his lucid analysis today. Thank you very much indeed. Dear friends and distinguished members of the press, we started formulating our energy policy during the 90s. And I had the pleasure of being also part of it, because I was Deputy Director General for Energy Affairs, the Climate Change and Environment. And we were asked to promote Turkey as a transit country. Of course, we had the two dimensions. One of our priorities was to promote, to enhance the energy security of Turkey. And the second one was to play a good role to be a good transit country and to contribute to the energy security of Europe. We had two dimensions in our energy strategy. And I think we managed to diversify our resources and routes. They were the priorities, and we received support from the Europeans and our American friends, in fact. And my dear friend Daphne knows well, through the Atlantic Council also. We worked hard together to build Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan and many other oil and gas infrastructure, for which we are thankful. Now we have a good infrastructure, and I think Mr. Topuz highlighted the importance of having a good infrastructure. So I agree with my colleague also, Gökalp Bey, that first of all, you need to be a transit country in order to prepare for becoming an energy hub or a gas trading center. I think it would be better to say a gas trading center. But of course, because of the Turkish Straits and also the Kirkuk-Yumurtalık pipeline and the planned other pipelines probably in the future through the Mediterranean, we will be maybe not only a gas trading hub, but really an energy hub, or not a gas trading center only, but an energy hub. What do we need to become a real gas trading center in the real sense of the word? We need, of course, to continue to be an important energy market. Turkey is in itself an important player. We're not only a transit country, so we are a huge energy market. Our geography we are situated in such a place that we see naturally we are a kind of center in the Eastern Mediterranean between the energy producing, gas producing countries and between the gas consuming countries. We are close to the Balkans, to the Eastern Mediterranean and to the Caucasus, and to Iran and Iraq and Syria. So location is so important. The physical infrastructure, yes, we did well, and we achieved a great deal as regards to infrastructure. We have probably the best infrastructure in the region, and we have established our not only the pipelines that what we need, but we also built, and we are building still some storage capacities. We are enhancing our storage capacity, which we need. The LNG facilities, the FSRUs, these are all important developments in order to become a gas trading center. What we need maybe in the future is to renegotiate the contracts. Mr. Topuz also mentioned in his paper that we need to negotiate new contracts, gas contracts, and maybe to get rid of the this how do you call it, the destination clause. I think what we need is to get rid of the destination clause. It's really important because we need to trade, and this take or pay is also a little bit. We are suffering from this take or pay clause, and also what we need is also to unbundle. To what extent we don't know, of course, but the unbundling of potash is important. The liberalization of the market, further liberalization is necessary. And you rightly said, Mr. Topuz, that we need transparent gas prices, reliable gas prices, and we need a good governance, very good governance. MRAC should play this role. We have our strengths and our weaknesses. So we should work all together if we believe that Turkey is the right country to become the gas trading hub in the region. The Turkish side and the Turkish authorities, together with the private sector, should work together to correct certain things and to provide the necessary legal environment and also the trading environment so that we can qualify as the country to be the gas trading center. So as I said, long-term contracts has to be renegotiated. And I don't like the oil index system, pricing system. Probably in the future, we should also get rid of the oil-priced, oil index pricing system. We need to replace it by another system. And here probably we will discuss it a little bit further. What sort of pricing system would be necessary for us to qualify as a good energy hub. I understand that many other countries, including our neighbors, would like to be the energy trading or gas trading center of the region, and they are all working hard to qualify to become the right center. So there is a competition, and therefore we need to work hard indeed. But we think that we have certain advantages that others don't have. But it doesn't mean that we are in a perfect shape. We're not in a perfect shape now. We need really to do our homework, to work hard, and prepare the necessary environment so that that neighboring countries and the Turkish private sector will qualify Turkey to be the energy trading center. Probably at this point we should stop here and see if Mr. Topuz would like to contribute further, given our explanations, or if there is any question. Mr. Hedefindeki, would you like to take the...
Thank you both for those great comments and Mr. Topuz's presentation. I think you both hit on important additional points to what Mr. Topuz has to say. Of course, the importance of getting rid of the destination clause is critical. I think the only thing I would add is that, you know, the complexity in a system where the government protects its energy consumers with prices that it basically controls because it has so much of the electricity supply, and the natural gas supply is controlled by BOTESH and the government with its tenders. And I admit that's an important responsibility and an obligation that the government has to Turkish energy consumers. But at the same time, it's difficult for industry to compete in a system where the energy prices aren't cost-based. And one of the, of course, most important changes to get to a gas hub where everything is market-based, and that also means that consumer prices have to be market-based. You can't have a system where you have a tradable gas hub and tradable electricity prices that reflect cost-based pricing, that could reflect supply and demand, and then at the same time keep consumer prices below market rates. So that's going to take time to get from here to there, and other methods have to be devised to protect consumers. Obviously, you don't need to protect high-income consumers. You have to figure out ways to protect the consumers that are at risk. So this doesn't happen overnight, and I think that's one important message, is that it's unrealistic to expect overnight change to the system. And the challenge is can it happen quickly enough that Turkey stays in the game to be the gas hub relative to the potential competition from other places? And that's what we're discussing here. Any comments that you have?
Well, thank you very much for all valuable additions. As I have stressed, I think if you ask me, one of the, we talked about the four main pillars, but I think the most important one is for any market, any liberal market, is that of predictability, that of sustainability. An investor or a developer looking at a market as a target or to participate in or to develop projects into has to make some projections in itself in order to make investment decisions. And these projections rely on the price signals generated by the markets themselves. And these price signals have to act on the fundamental dynamics of supply and demand. They have to be forming up in a transparent market, in a transparent mechanisms, and they need to be reliable so that if you're looking forward to bringing gas into the Turkish market, you should be able to predict the prices in the market for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. That makes a market a benchmark, a benchmark market that produces the signals required by the investors to develop projects and make investments. I think this has been one of the biggest problems with the Turkish market. I mean, this is not just because BOTAŞ's dominant position, having control over 80% of the gas, But it also originates, there's a vicious cycle, there's a chicken-egg relationship. I mean, all of BOTAŞ contracts are oil-linked, and they are dollar-based, dollar-denominated, so they're very much vulnerable to global shocks in commodity prices and the macro developments that affect the value of the Turkish lira. And BOTAŞ saw it as a social welfare mission to regulate the ups and downs and the bumps on the road regarding prices, and in order to deliver end users a relatively flat price curve, and in order for them to control their costs. This was, although made with all good intentions, this in turn created a marketplace where nobody can predict what's going to happen to the prices next year, next month. It was such a big policy decision that you have to make a guess in order to make your investment decisions, and you don't have any control or any mechanism that you can benchmark to or refer to in order to come up with a predictable price level, a signal level. I have experienced this in the power market a lot. As some of you already know, that Turkish power market has seen considerable installed capacity additions over the course of the past 10 years. And this was a very successful example of the Turkish power market. The power market was very successful in terms of producing the price signals, having a market mechanism, players having bilateral contracts and spot market prices, a day-ahead market complemented with an intraday market later on. And we saw most of these capacity additions, most of them were through gas-fired power plants. Between, I think between 2005 and 2015, the gas-fired generation capacity rose all the way up to 25 gigawatts. And all these projects had their own feasibility studies where they forecasted both the power prices and the gas prices, so that they have a spark spread level where they intend to make profit from, where they intend to pay back their project financed costs and everything, and the returns on the invested capital. But in a market where you cannot know one aspect of the price component, that's the cost of gas you burn in your power plant, it's quite difficult to have a positive feasibility coming up. So we've seen that all those investments in the market are having hard time right now to keep paying back their debt, because the prices that they have forecasted for this year's, for 2020s, 2019, is nowhere near what they had in front of them 5 years ago, 10 years ago, when they made the investment decisions. This is a very practical example of what would happen if the signal creation capacity of the markets are incapacitated. I think this is a fundamental lesson that we have to take out from this issue. Although with good intentions of social welfare or direct subsidization and controlling of cost factors in the industry or whatever you would like to say, while trying to do something good, we actually created something very unpredictable, which affected all of the system balance. This is, I think, one of the major setbacks and issues that we need to overcome. We need to believe and trust in a liberal market where a price discovery is possible through supply and demand.
May I add a few points?
Yeah. First of all, do you have any comments?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Topuz. Indeed, what we need is predictability, transparency, and credibility. They are quite important. And also, you raised the issue of the reverse flow option, which is, I believe, quite important, because in the years ahead, it's highly likely that we will be able to tap our renewable energy potential, given the reduced energy or solar energy prices, solar technology prices, the reduced prices. We have a huge potential to make use of. And then, in this case, we will have excess energy. Maybe we will have more with our LNG reception facilities and FSRUs, and probably also the possibility of having more LNG from the United States and other countries, we will have more gas than what we need. We will have excess gas, and this gas must be traded. We should have the opportunity to trade the gas that we want to use, and this is why I think it becomes all the more important that we establish the mechanisms and try to trade gas. That is, and in order to be able to trade gas, we need also to have the option, this reverse flow option of the Western pipeline. So this is what I wanted to add shortly. Thank you.
I would like to make a couple of comments on what you said, Kerem Bey. One of them is regarding the social mission point that you raise. I think this is not a point only happening in Turkey. So in all over the world, regulators or suppliers are obliged to take care of social facts on pricing of energy. But there are different ways of doing it. For instance, in many countries, as far as we know, there are social prices and protected customers and so on. So today, in the mechanism that is applied in Turkey, everybody is enjoying this social mission. So everybody means you have a restaurant, you are enjoying this. Maybe while eating this facility, we are enjoying this. And not sure we are all really need this social mission coverage. So that's why I think we need to determine the dedicated population who needs really subsidy for energy prices and apply this social mission for only that portion of the customers. And for the rest, what we can do is we can free up the market and let the prices go and find its competitive environment to reach to a more, let's say, understandable pricing. This is one thing. And the other thing is subsidy is, I believe, also all over the world there are subsidies, the ways of subsidies. We cannot say that it is only happening in our market. But you can do it differently according to what you are targeting. For instance, today we are subsidizing, in quotation, the energy prices, but what you can do, you can subsidize the consequences as well. You can let the energy prices go and see the consequences, and if you need to do something for these consequences, you can arrange it through different taxations and so on, and create a real liberal energy market, which you will benefit at the end. Because while subsidizing upfront, we are already overcoming a cost. Maybe this cost is more than what we should subsidize at the end. So I think we need to try different ways of doing this to see what is beneficial really for the market and to reach to a well-structured energy market. Thank you.
I agree with Gökalp Bey that, and I think Professor De Filio has also highlighted the importance of having the consumer prices, they should be market-based. It's quite important, and if you need to subsidize and of course, it's important to for any government to assist and support the poor and the disadvantaged. But of course, we should not create a kind of havoc in the market. This is why it's important to be predictable. So probably, maybe we should advise in our paper the relevant authorities that if you need to subsidize and support. It's called the social support system. If you would like to create a social support system, then it should not be through the implementation of 3 types of prices. And also, one final point is that I agree with you that potash share should be reduced to a reasonable level if we are to become an energy or a gas trading center. Potash with its 82% or 80% market share doesn't sound quite good in the market. So, yeah, thank you.
I think now would be a good time to open it up to questions. Daphne, I see you're right there. Do you have any question you'd like to ask? Okay, please start off.
Do I need a microphone?
Yes, you do.
Yeah. Do I need to stand up? I'm quite tall, though, just so.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you for this great report. Kerem Bey, congratulations. It is very well written. And congratulations, Carmen and Doğan, just for this initiation. This hub thing, I have one comment and one question for Kerem Bey. One comment is very much in line with what Mr. Özkök has just pointed out about. I think the main issue is that, we all agree that it is great that Turkey should become a hub. It's very beneficial, and Turkey should become a hub. But on the other hand, to become a hub and to make the main point is that how to make Turkey an attractive destination so that the outsiders will be willing to come to Turkey and willing to trade. And why to trade here but not anywhere else, right, is the main question. So it relates to actually, goes back to the fact that to make Turkey is the investment, destination and favorable investment environment for foreigners, in the general perspective is the main one thing. My question is, was the comment, my question is to Kerem Bey. In your analysis, just what, if you can outline also some of the, if there are any, I don't know, so I'm asking you, any risk associated or any obligations, burden that may be associated when Turkey becomes a hub, and if Turkey is ready to, face these obligations and, burdens when it becomes a hub. So in a way, is Turkey is, so these are the questions, just very briefly. Thank you.
Thank you for your kind words about the paper and study. And thank you for the very well question in this aspect, that we are most of the time looking at the positive aspects of a hub development, whereas we have to keep in mind the potential risks associated with it. Well, frankly speaking, I don't see a direct risk associated by being a liquid trading center. However, this is a process that needs to be orchestrated with all parties and all aspects involved. What I'm trying to say is that Turkey holds a lot of contracts, mainly BOTAŞ holds a lot of contracts, and they all have to be aligned according to the requirements of a liberal trade environment in a natural gas hub in order for the hub to actually operate properly. If we have say the Russian and the Azeri contracts on flexible terms, what we don't have the Iranian gas on flexible terms, then there still leaves a large elephant in the room, which needs to be managed in terms of supply to end users, because the cost level associated with a strict restrictive contract needs to be blended with the cost of the flexible contracts by the off-takers. This is one of the risks I see that needs to be managed properly. So this is an all-around process. Everybody around the table needs to understand the dynamics and needs to understand the win-win conditions, the synergy created through the negotiations, and have to come on favorable terms for both parties. The second is Turkey is still lacking the connections required for the excess gas to be sold to complementary markets, the Southeastern Europe. Right now we have very limited export capacity. That's why we can't stress enough the bidirectional flow opportunity of the West Line. Right now this West Line is being replaced by Turk Stream, and we need to take the steps to make West Line a bidirectional line so that we can sell gas from the West Line to Europe. Of course, contractual conditions apply, but those are also need to be renegotiated. Because otherwise, when you have this hub with lots of excess gas, but you don't have anywhere to take it to, Your excess regasification capacity or your lots of pipelines and entry capacity does not mean much when you can't make benefit of it. Then you would need more investments in, for example, this time liquefaction. You would try to liquefy probably the gas in the pipeline and try to make it an LNG, which doesn't make sense right now because of the supply glut in the LNG markets. So this is a process that needs to be carefully considered with all aspects involved. Thank you. Any additions? Would you like me to?
Just one point.
Yeah.
If we have excess gas through our LNG imports, and then Ukraine or other countries around would need gas through our pipeline systems, you said that we don't have the capacity to export, but we can easily build the Turkey-Bulgaria interconnector. And it should have been built a long time ago. It was a big mistake on the part of BOTAŞ not to, in my view. And also we can expand the capacity of the Turkey-Greece interconnector. But unfortunately, I understand that, that Turk Stream 2, when it was negotiated as a transit pipeline. So we have no right to be partners in trading the gas which will flow, the 15.75 BCM, which will flow to Europe or to the Balkans through Turkish Stream 2. This is the situation. So what we need is probably, I think several weeks ago when we discussed this matter also, one of our friends argued that we can sell LNG, regasified LNG, that we will import, for example, to Marmara Ereğlisi, and then we can send by pipeline to Ukraine or to other countries in need. And this is how we can become. We have to be forthcoming in this regard. We need to establish all the infrastructure and establish the legal framework and really show everybody that we are predictable, transparent, and credible, because it's very important. The confidence, the trust and confidence should be restored and enhanced so that Turkey will be regarded by its neighbors also as a hub. It's very, very important.
Let's see if we have another question. Over here. And please say who you are and stand up, please.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Topuz, for a great presentation. My name is Emre Atipoğlu. I am faculty at Sabancı University. So I got one very quick and one relatively longer question. The quick question is the recent signing of the Caspian Littoral States Agreement. Did it have any effect on your projections of Turkey's gas future? And for the longer one, you showed 4 pillars, and I was kind of stuck at the regulatory/legal, which touches on, His Excellency's point about transparency. Absent a strong legal framework and freedom of contract and freedom of enforcement of contract and a strong arbitration mechanism or lack thereof, how much value can Turkey create out of these gas molecules? Thank you.
Thanks for the questions. The long one is actually shorter to answer. Not much I have to say. Basically, this is a major prerequisite in order to actually be a liberal trading environment. You have to have the free market rules in place and the necessary legal framework in order to regulate this. Regarding the first question, I am not fully aware of the details of the agreement, but still there is quite an important missing link in the system, that we need to take first the gas from Turkey outside Turkey in order to be able to market it in Southeastern Europe. What we're seeing right now happening in the Southeastern Europe is that they are themselves preparing for their own hub that would transit, the gas would transit from Turkey and just across the border would enter into a hub, which wouldn't make much sense if you look at it from a practical point of view, given all the infrastructure and billions of money spent inside Turkey for underground storage or variable demand mechanisms, gas-fired power plants and everything. So I would say that contract can still be an advantage, but we have to solve the fundamental problem first by taking the gas outside across our borders first in order to benefit from the contract. Thank you. Anything to add from the panelists? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the very nice presentation and study, and thank you very much for the contributions from the panel. I would like to ask a few questions, and it's open to everyone for your comments. First of all, Mr. Rende mentioned earlier that Turkey actually studied on this quite a long time ago, being a transit country and then maybe converting to a trading center, as you mentioned. How determined was Turkey in becoming a trading center in the end? Or was Turkey not having a clear vision in that respect, so it lost focus and then risks ending up being a transit country? Is that the case? That's my first question. Currently, looking at the economic situation in Turkey, and also considering the fact that the subsidies in gas prices was mainly driven by cross subsidies between generators and PPA contracts of CCGTs. Those contracts are coming to an end and have come to an end partly. So all of these subsidies will have to be financed. Looking at the current economic situation, can we say that there's more pressure on the state to remove these subsidies and turn to a social tariff, as mentioned by you, to minimize the cost of the subsidy? Is that a good opportunity for that? But also at the same time, there's a draft legislation regarding this spot import of natural gas into Turkey. Do you see that as a risk, that such a trading hub or a trading opportunity is not foreseen for the time being, because it's only import, it's not export, and it's not included there? And one last comment, if you may have any comments on this, just a question mark. We are always talking about destination clause and how it actually impedes the Turkey becoming a gas trading center. Since Turkey is now actually having quite a lot of contracts, actually, import contracts, long-term contracts, including spot LNG contracts. Spot LNG actually accounted for approximately 6 BCM of gas last year. That's a very huge amount. And that there are multiples of sources. When a gas is exported, who will claim that one contract's destination clause has been breached, and how? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. A very important point that you raised. In my introductory remarks, I talked about the late 90s, and during the 90s when we started formulating our energy policy, we were in dire situation. We had no renewable energy resources, very limited. And then we had, they estimated the Turkish gas consumption to reach 50 BCM even 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So there was apparently a miscalculation when the Prime Minister, when Mesut Yilmaz was the Prime Minister. I think they exaggerated the Turkish gas consumption, and they offered him interesting figures. So we were not in a position to negotiate probably, and we had tough negotiators to negotiate with Gazprom and the Azeris, and you know our Azeri brothers, they are really tough negotiators. And there, the destination clause was almost non-negotiable for them. I mean, it had to be there. So this is why our priority was to provide Turkey with gas, because politically it was not affordable to leave Turkey without heating when it was -30 in Kars, Erzurum, and Erzincan. So politically it was not affordable, and every prime minister would naturally just focus on the political aspect and the social aspect of the matter. So I must admit that the gas contract were not easily negotiated to have escape clauses or to have not to have destination clauses. So we faced serious difficulties. And when we negotiated TANAP, for example, I remember that when we started the first negotiations with our partners, the TANAP partners, they had their formidable British legal team with them, and all the partners. And then they offered us, they prepared, of course, the first draft, which was 90 plus pages. And then we studied it, and we looked at it, and we said, I personally said, what is in it for me here? Well, you left nothing to Turkey. So we said, okay, let's have a break and then go and shorten this paper and make it a reasonable one. I mean, just we had to really have a balanced paper, because if you negotiate such an important document and then you're dealing with billions of dollars of a project, so you need to have a durable one. And in order to be durable, it has to be just. So we told them that please go ahead if you are drafting. And then we asked our team to work, but it was not possible for Turkey to inject more elements into the paper. As regards, you rightly said that maybe we should have thought earlier that we needed to trade at least part of the gas. It was not possible. But today, if we are now, given the situation today, we are in a position maybe to negotiate better. And honestly, you're right. When we started introducing Turkey as a transit country, being a hub was not so topical, or it was not so fashionable to work as a hub. We were really happy with being a transit country, getting the right transit fees. But also, for example, when we negotiated Bakü-Tbilisi-Ceyhan, the oil prices were $16 per barrel. So we were not lucky either. So it was $16, so the transit fee was also very low. But today the situation is different, and I hope that we can negotiate new contracts in the interest of all, because you cannot just think your side. There should be a win-win situation when we negotiate new contracts, and I hope the private sector will play its role also. And I hope the Turkish authorities will give the chance to the private sector to also take their fair share in these contracts, and hope we'll get better.
Okay,
Sorry,
question?
it was a bit long.
First of all, you have to answer this.
Yeah, there are two more questions by Serhat Bey. Would you like to add anything?
No, let's go.
All right. Thank you very much for the question, Serhat Bey. Your other two questions, one of them is about cross subsidies, and the other one is about spot imports, spot exports. I will try to answer them and share my opinions. First, this cross-subsidy issue was the fundamental mechanism, as you have explained, of the state in order to manage the decoupling of oil and gas prices in Turkey. When we first started seeing this pattern in the price trends, I mean, oil prices rising, but gas prices not rising. This was managed through the BOT power plants. They were using gas at a more expensive price. EÜAŞ, the state-owned generation company, was using gas at a more expensive price. And in turn, the BOTAŞ, it was mixed in the BOTAŞ balance sheet. It was sweetened in the BOTAŞ balance sheet to soften the blow of the subsidies. This was possible up to a certain point, and this was possible through basically EÜAŞ capability to generate large amounts of hydropower through already amortized hydropower facilities like Atatürk, Keban, Karakaya, as you already know. And thus in turn created the cushion necessary in the power market, so that the expensive power generated by expensive gas in the contracted merchant power plants was softened by the hydro generation through EÜH within the TETAŞ roof, so that the end users do not feel the effects on the power prices. But with the ending of the vesting contracts, the contract for the contracted merchant power plants, BOTs, this tool is being taken out of the government's hands. And what the signs of what's going to happen was in the EÜH balance sheet for the past 2 years. Think about a large power generation company with already fully subsidized power generation assets and mainly hydropower facilities that are fully paid back, but it's still making a loss and still making very little profit, because it's foregoing all the potential profit in favor of trying to manage the BOTAŞ balance sheet through a pricing mechanism. So this is the pattern that emerged. It was possible first through BOT contracts, but now it's possible through EÜH hydropower facilities up to a certain point. Up to a certain point, the time will tell how far further away this can be taken, because it means that a certain amount of profits or revenue lost in the state-owned entities and certain amount of treasury backup in those government state-owned entities. So the time will tell, but it seems as long as they hold the power of hydropower generation, as long as the hydrology is favorable for Turkey, they can sort of still create the cushion on the price itself. The third question about spot imports, you're right. I mean, one would say that who's gonna look at the molecules and understand where it is coming from, but the fact that once it goes into a pool, it's mixed, but it's a licensed, regulated activity, market activity. It's a regulated through licensing mechanism. So an exporter needs to have an export license, and an importer needs to have an import license. So therefore, there's no churn in the market. There's no gas changing hands, so that you won't end up Russian gas changing hands several times and being exported. Within the absence of a spot market, it's still you still have to violate your contracts if you want to go over these destination clauses in your contract. You would have to violate in terms of your importing with your import license and exporting it with your export license, where you would have to require and show the origin of your gas. Would you agree with me? I don't know. If you have any further comments, I would like to hear them.
With the concept of daily market, actually. I partly agree, and partly I'd like to add that when there is more liquidity in the market, in the day-ahead markets, if a trader buys from the day-ahead market and sells to an export country, destination clause becomes obsolete, I think. And that way, those clauses will be deemed.
You have to still book capacity on the exit point, and show in your export license, show the source of the gas in order to obtain that export license. So I don't think our license regulation allows for spot gas exports. Yeah. Would you like to add anything?
I think in a pure trading hub situation, people would be buying gas from the hub, and there's no distinguishing the gas from the hub. They're all molecules, CH4 molecules. So the contracts, again, in a pure system, like Henry Hub, nobody knows where the gas came from. You're buying gas from Henry Hub, and nobody cares where the gas came from. Now, of course, all the gas is coming from the United States, but even in a Turkish hub, the question of whether it came from Azerbaijan or Russia or Iran, it wouldn't make any difference. The contract is, it's a commodity contract, so you're buying a commodity. So the nationality disappears. Now this is a pure trading hub, but you really can't have a pure trading hub unless you do this. You can't have half and half. You can't be exporting gas with identifying the gas as having a national origin and have a commodity hub. The two concepts are incompatible with each other. Next question.
Thank you very much. Eren Aksoy from EPH. I would like to ask Mr. Rende. There is one good opportunity I think we have in our front, that the termination of the Western Line pipeline contracts in 2021. But when we discuss the contract negotiations that you mentioned earlier, I would like to learn a little bit more, according to your experience. When we discuss it, do we just discuss the gas contract, or is it part of our whole international foreign affairs? And the second question is to the floor. How much do you think that having a pipeline in place, but not gas sales agreement in place, would help us to reach Turkish ambitions to become a gas trading center for the Western pipeline, this termination of this gas contract? Thank you.
Repeat your second question, please.
We have a Turkish stream gas pipeline in place. There is a intergovernmental agreement in place, but according to my knowledge, that there is still no gas sales agreement between Gazprom and BOTAŞ or any Turkish other parties. So it gives Turkey a leverage or upper hand for the gas contract negotiations. So how much do you think that Turkey can use as its own benefit to have a better position as a gas trading center in the region? Thank you.
It's a very good question. May I, Professor De Filio, or?
Well,
okay, go ahead, please.
Okay.
It was put to me, the first part.
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry, thank you for the question. You're right, when we used to negotiate certain contracts and agreements, we started with we haven't started with the most difficult articles. We started with the easy ones and tried to clear the text. And in many cases, we had to refer the matter to the political authorities to decide. Of course, it's true that certain agreements and contracts were part of a package. It was a package deal, so you had to give and take. And certain, for example, certain figures were determined at highest level, not at technical level or bureaucrat level. So it's true. And given the political circumstances and the economic circumstances, probably it was not possible to negotiate further or to say, well, sorry, I'm not there. I won't play the game. So you go and sell your gas to. We needed to conclude contracts for political and social reasons. So the most difficult part of the contracts were concluded at highest level, at political level. Yes, and I'm glad that you said that there is no gas sales agreement as yet for Turk Stream 2, because I would love to. I would be delighted to hear that we are part of it and that we will be trading gas with the Russians together to Europe. It would be great to have such an opportunity.
The one that I mentioned, termination of BOTAŞ Western pipelines contracts are not renewed yet. So I'm not talking about the ones that. I'm not talking about the ones that Russia is planning to sell to Europe. I don't have any knowledge on that. But the ones that they are selling to Turkey, they are going to be terminated in 2021.
Yes.
So those are still being negotiated and not signed yet,
Yes.
although the new pipeline is almost in place.
Yes. My understanding is that, that when we negotiated the pipeline 2, we were not able to get this, the conditions. We were not able to get, for example, the opportunity to trade gas together with Gazprom. So Gazprom, as regards, I remain to be corrected. As regards Turk Stream 2, Gazprom is the owner of the gas, and then we will be the transit country, and so they will decide whether to send it through Greece or through Bulgaria. It remains to be seen. We know that it arrived at Kuyuköy, and a Turkish company is building. I think they are about to complete the compressor station, which is a formidable also compressor station at Kuyuköy. And from there, it has to cross Thrace, but they haven't decided probably yet where they would take it.
Please,
I
go
may.
ahead.
Yeah.
Fill in the mics here.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Eren Bey, for the questions. I would like to also take this opportunity to thank you in person for your efforts on the continuous trading platform. It's very well appreciated for Turkey. First, I think I can give a few words on your second question. It's a leverage game basically. All contract negotiations are leverage games. We don't know what sort of assurances have been given to Russia in order to grant the international overseas exclusive economic zone passage of the Turkish pipeline or the transit going through Turkey. We don't know what sort of assurances or trade agreements, unwritten trade agreements were made, but we see it. I see it as a chess game. It's a leverage that we have right now in our hands, but our opponent has other chess pieces on the board. The arbitration cases recently concluded regarding the discounts offered between 2017 and 2018 taken back. Right now we are sort of in a deadlock situation, which creates a loss-loss case for both parties involved. We are looking at a very large arbitration award, retrospectively applicable, and we are looking at a large take-or-pay penalty, potentially a very large take-or-pay penalty. We are looking at a very large loss of revenue for Gazprom. And we are looking at the end of the period of the contracts. So it's a chessboard basically, and each side have their own pieces on the board, and let's see how this rolls out. But this is clearly one of the biggest topics of the Turkish gas business, and I think one of the largest, one of the last cars in the train, the gas up train that's departing this station. If we are to become a gas hub, this wagon we need to get on. We need to get something out of this last chess game in order to renew these contracts, and all the pieces are on the board right now. You are right in that point. Thank you.
If I may, Kerem Bey.
Please.
It's a good question, but I have a couple of questions on top of this question. First of all, do we really need to renew that contract with Gazprom, or can we make another contract with another party? I think the answer is yes. So the pipeline is there, but you can change the supplier maybe. The second thing is it really BOTAŞ who is going to make a contract on that? Maybe another private party will do it. So, and the third thing is, I'm not sure if Turkey will need that contract, depending on demand and shift of supply means. So that's why there are lots of unknowns. And when you make a contract, you need a pipe. But when you already have the pipe, you don't need an immediate contract. It can come 1 year later, 2 years later, depending on your requirements.
Why don't you respond to that?
I would agree with all of you said. That's a very good point. Thank you.
So, the next question.
So thank you so much for your presentation. I have two questions actually. One is related to, like, if you are going to look at the literature and also some of the recent news, we see that most of South European countries, they're also suggesting that they're becoming an energy hub. Like Greece, Bulgaria, and also the Italy, actually. They're all suggesting that they're becoming an energy hub. So when we look at those countries, like why Turkey should be a country of choice, for countries to become energy hub. When you look at the Italian market, it's more settled down, and also given the issue of unbundling is not resolved, and also issue of gas pricing, it's not a hub-based or spot price basing, because a lot of our current actually contracts are based on oil index and dollar actually denominated. So from that perspective, if you're going to look at the the issue, why Turkey should be a country of choice when you compare to South European countries, given that their situation is much better. This is the first one, and the second question is about if we are going to look at the energy hub literature, the issue of we see a lot of qualitative studies that are saying that if you become an energy hub, then you will have a macroeconomic impact. You are going to have a job creation, and also your market is going to be more free, and etc. But there is almost no literature exists, the quantitative aspect of it, because I haven't heard or read anything else that is related to that looks at the quantitative aspect. What I mean by that, so if we are going to become a truly genuine energy trading hub, so like what exactly the impact on GDP? Like, is it like 1%, or is it going to be like, because when you look at the countries like Ukraine, even Turkey, if you are going to become an energy transit hub, then you have pipelines and they are paying you a fee, right? So we have in our hand a price, actually. We are receiving a benefit from that. But given that if you become an energy hub, then what exactly the benefit? So can we put that aspect of it on paper that, if you become an energy hub, then can we have like 10 billion US dollars, or what is it? Is there any studies, exist on that? So, or have you ever looked at it from that perspective? Thank you so much.
Thank you. And before I turn that question over to you to answer, I think we've got a loose discussion of what an energy hub is, because, we can have a virtual hub where basically a hub is simply a way to have price discovery. What we're talking about here in Turkey is not a virtual hub, it's actually a physical hub where Turkey becomes a delivery point for gas, for executing contracts, and becomes an export point for executing contracts. And there could be 5 different virtual hubs that could exist in the Balkans, and it wouldn't really matter. If Turkey established a physical hub, all those hubs would become basically irrelevant, in my opinion, because being a physical hub would mean that the commercial players would be, when you have executed contract for delivery or purchase, you actually can execute the contract with physical delivery or acceptance of product, and I think that makes a physical hub that's also a commodity pricing hub, that makes it much more important than a place that's a pricing hub. And where in the Balkans do you have the kind of storage capacity and transit of pipelines that would allow that kind of hub to exist? I don't think it exists, and I think that's why Turkey is has such an important opportunity, because BOTAŞ has established a fabulous pipeline distribution system. It's expanding its natural gas storage capacity. It's got this tremendous amount of excess regasification capacity with floating LNG terminals. With a relatively modest increase of physical infrastructure, it could actually have a physical gas hub here in Turkey, where I don't think there's anywhere in Southeastern Europe that could do that. And that's why I think Turkey's got this great opportunity to be both a natural gas trading center and a physical hub. And those two things combine synergistically to make the, if it established it, it would become the most important hub in Southeastern Europe, regardless of what anybody else did.
May I add, Professor,
Yeah, please.
one point? Many thanks indeed for having so eloquently defended our case,
Yes.
Turkey's case, as an American academic. Well said. Just to reinforce what you have said, and a kind of answer to your good question, why Turkey should be the country of choice? Because of its location, because of its infrastructure, it was said already, and because it is in the East Med, and also because we can easily reach out to the Balkans, easily. You can just build 100 plus kilometers of pipeline, and then you are in Bulgaria. And then from Bulgaria, you have the infrastructure too. And by NATO standards, Italy is not in the East Med. It's a central Mediterranean country, although they like to play this important role. Professor De Filio said rightly that they could be also a kind of virtual hub if they so desire. But Turkey is the right place, I think, and it is the East Med that we are looking for a center. I think we should be the right candidate, but again, predictability, transparency, and so on, we need really to play. I don't believe, by the way, that the Italian establishment is a better establishment than the Turkish one as regards transparency and predictability and so on. So I served, by the way, in Rome for a while as a diplomat. So they are yet also to improve their establishment as regards transparency, predictability, and so on. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the first question is very well answered. I'm just going to make a minor addition. A trade operation requires apparently two sides, supply and demand. Having just the supply is not enough, but you have to have the demand and the flexibility associated with demand in order to talk about spot trade and liquidity and debt. I think that's one of the major missing points in the Balkans. That's the danger we are talking about right now, stealing the role of a hub from Turkey and shifting it towards Balkans. But we have the necessary demand flexibility that can be created through gas-fired power plants or the underground storage systems. That can be an aspect in the trade that in a hub, which is quite lacking in the Balkan system. That's one minor addition to the first question, but yeah, please.
If I can contribute, when we are talking about demand, Turkey also has a potential to have an increase in demand.
Yeah,
as well.
definitely.
So
that's what I'm saying.
It's a big market. We are talking about officially 80 million, but with the tourists coming, it is reaching the 130 million during the year in close. And also, if you look at the consumption per capita, it's below Europe. So consumption per capita may increase. That's why it can be a very interesting energy market for many players in the future.
We can absorb the excess capacity, or we can deliver the missing capacity that the target markets require, which I don't think any Balkan country can do right now. So that was the answer, I think, to your first question. The second one, if I may. Well, I think if you look at, for example, Germany, we are touching base with the German case in the paper towards the final sections. Germany started to import about at the same time natural gas from Russia, and we see that the BAFA announced prices, they have actually introduced considerable price revisions and have decreased their cost levels of natural gas. This is made possible through the price revision clauses in the long-term contracts. The price revision clause in the long-term contracts says that the gas has to be marketable, a price level that has to be marketable. And if it is challenged, the off-taker has the right to ask for a price revision. And what we have seen is that in the presence of a market where there is gas-to-gas competition, the off-taker can go back to the supplier, the Gazprom in this case, and tell them, look, we cannot make use of your gas because there's cheaper gas in the system. Or we cannot make use of your gas because it's not competitive anymore. Whereas we couldn't say that because our price was controlled by a single large entity and it was apparently subsidized. This is not what I'm saying. This is what the arbitration court in Stockholm has said recently. Remember the discount and the associated with the associated arbitration claims. It was not awarded because saying that you don't have the necessary conditions for price revision. We couldn't create the price condition for revisions inside the market, whereas the markets where there is free trade, liberal mechanisms, they create the price conditions. And the decreasing cost level, needless to say, contributes to the GDP of a country through a decreased cost base for all activities involved and increases the value created from the industry. There's no numerical study for Turkey. I would agree with you. It would be a very large effort, and I would love to see such a study. It would require significant macroeconomical modeling, considering the cross-links with different industries. But common sense dictates that if you can decrease your cost base for your activities, economic activities, you would increase the value created for your contribution. One thing that has happened in Turkey due to this, the pricing policy was Turkey is an import-dependent country for energy, but we have cultivated energy-intensive sectors in our economy. Look at the cement sector, look at the glass sector, look at the iron and steel sector. These are very energy-intensive industries, yet they are flourishing in Turkey. All of the scrap metal in the world is brought to Turkey to be melted through subsidized gas and sold back to Europe. So this is a fundamental destructive thing that actually decreases the macroeconomical effects to negative levels. If that's an answer enough, I don't know.
I have just been reminded that we are out of time.
Oh, really?
So I want to ask everybody to...
There's someone in the back with the final question, I think.
Pardon?
He's been raising hands for a long time. There's one.
Yeah, I became older for waiting. Thank you very much. This is Onur Günay from Petek Enerji. Mr. Topuz, thank you for your presentation, and the speakers, thank you for your contributions. Actually, my question is about the current political turmoil in Eastern Mediterranean.
I'm going to have to close the session right now.
It's about becoming a hub?
No, I understand, but we are out of time.
Okay, thank you very much for your understanding.
Sorry about that. We'll talk in between, okay?
Thank you very much.
Offline.
Thank you very much.
There's going to be a reception, and everybody can ask questions.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
The last thing I want to